Something I've noticed Genshin doing lately is designing characters around certain reactions. Directly speaking, Nilou and Kaveh strengthen the power of Bloom and Fremine uses Shatter. Now we're entering 4.3, where Navia is going to utilize Crystallize, and Cheverus will be our Overload unit. All of this to say that we're opening the gates for more characters to have kits that specialize in a specific reaction, so it's only a matter of time until we get a unit that's actually focused on Burgeon. I was hoping Dia would fall under the Burgeon niche, but I was sorely mistaken. Rather than wait around for their release, I wanted to do something very interesting this episode. I wanted to design my own character, fit with fully fleshed out talents, constellations, best weapon, artifacts, and team comps. The disclaimers for this new mini-series are a bit different from my others, so we'll quickly go over them. Starting off, as always, I'm not a theory crafting master, so don't come after me if I get a few concepts wrong. Second, the main focus of this is the concept, not the numbers. I will not be providing talent multipliers, but I will provide some numbers when it comes to certain bonuses. Since there are no numbers, expect no calculations. Third, everyone might have different ideas on what a character's kit may look like. This is just my personal interpretation. At the end of the day, it's the same as always. Be respectful when you want to critique in the comments. Now that I've gotten disclaimers out of the way, let's jump into the first part, design philosophy. The first step for a Burgeon character was the element and weapon. Obviously, I had to choose Pyro because how else are they going to be the Burgeon trigger? For the weapon, I chose to give him a sword. This stemmed from the fact that Bennett is the only Pyro sword user in the game, and we are well overdue for another. Next thing I decided on was the rarity. I chose to make him a 4-star for this reason. When it comes to a 5-star character like Nilou, she fundamentally changes the way the Bloom reaction works by altering its properties. But 4-star characters like Kaveh and Fremine simply capitalize on a reaction, and they don't actually alter its properties. That's exactly what this character does. He's just someone who makes use of Burgeon well. I also had 2 characters in mind when I was thinking of the kit, Thoma and Kuki. Thoma is currently considered our Burgeon unit, and one of his niches is being a dedicated Pyro shielder. I wanted to make sure my concept didn't have a Pyro shield as well, because that would feel repetitive. Then for Kuki, I felt I could take more liberties to these characters having similarities. After all, they trigger their respective reactions in a similar manner. Of course, I took steps to ensure that my concept wasn't a carbon copy of her. I chose to add some healing to his kit, since Burgeon has self-damaging properties and we don't have a shielder to mitigate that damage. For the sake of making it easier while I talk, our Burgeon unit will have the filler name Bur, which is the most original name I have ever created. For his stats, his ascension is going to be attack percent. All of his abilities scale with attack, and while EM will be more important, I believe he'll get that from multiple outside sources, so this just helps to balance out his stats. Burr's basic attack is the standard attack. His normal attack is a 4-hit combo, which deals physical damage to enemies. Using a charge attack will deal 2 quick strikes of physical damage, and when he uses a plunging attack, he will deal a single instance of AoE physical damage. This talent is low damage and is generally negligible to level up, since he's supposed to be an off-field DPS and support. For his skill, Burr will throw a bouncing ball which can hit up to 3 nearby enemies. All enemies will take pyro damage, and when the ball returns, they'll be marked with an Ashen Angel. Up to 3 enemies can be marked at a time. This damage scales off attack. Let's quickly look at the properties of Ashen Angel. Every 1.5 seconds, all marked enemies will emit an AoE pyro hit, which deals pyro damage. The mark will last for 12 seconds and scale off Burr's attack. Ashen Angel's damage is considered skill damage. It has a standard ICD, so with its 1.5 second interval, it can apply pyro every other hit to the same target. But if the targets are close enough, it's possible to apply more pyro if multiple emissions hit the enemies in quick succession. Every hit will generate 1 particle, allowing him to battery himself and other pyro teammates. The cooldown for this ability is 15 seconds, which means at C0 there's a 3-second downtime. Burr's Burst has a 15-second cooldown with a 60 energy cost. The duration of this ability is also 15 seconds, meaning that using his burst on cooldown results in 100% uptime. Upon casting, Burr will deal AoE pyro damage and heal his entire party by a percentage of his attack and EM. He will also apply the smokescreen effect to his teammates. As for the properties of smokescreen, when any party member takes damage from a Dendrocore, including Burgeon and Hyperbloom, that party member will instead be healed based on a percentage of Burr's attack and EM, while the off-field members will be healed by a smaller percentage of his attack. Additionally, his skill and Ashen Angel's damage will be increased by a percentage of Burr's EM. This burst is meant to allow Burr to fulfill the role of a team healer. It's very easy to trigger Burgeon through his skill, and the healing will be able to outdo whatever the Dendrocore damage does, plus a bit extra. The extra skill damage is pretty negligible, but it does help to give him some multi-scaling damage. Unlike Kuki, he's going to need a high amount of ER if you want to use him as your sole healer. If you choose to pair him with another healer, then you can for the most part ignore having this burst up at all times, since the healing is the most important part of that ability. For his A1 passive, we have the following. During the duration of Burr's burst, the active character gains a 15% pyro and dendro resistance bonus. I briefly mentioned this before, but I designed this kit around the idea that shielders are anti-synergistic. Since you wouldn't be running a shielder with Burr, this passive helps give the character some defensive utility. If you accidentally trigger burning and get too close to an enemy, you have some pyro resistance to keep you alive. And when you trigger Burgeon, that dendro resistance keeps you alive for that. For Burr's A4 passive, we finally get to the reason as to why he doesn't want a shielder. When any party member takes Dendro Core damage, Burr gains a stack of Blazing Bombardment. Every stack increases his own Burgeon damage by 15%, with a maximum of 5 stacks. You want to make sure that your team is capable of taking these core hits so that Burr can essentially deal more damage. Due to its riskier gameplay, you can see why I opted to give Burr very strong healing potential. At max stacks, Burr will give his Burgeons a 75% damage boost, which is almost as much as the 4-piece Flower of Paradise Lost set, and stacking that up with the set makes his damage even higher. Let's move on to his Constellations. At C1, his elemental skill will last for an additional 3 seconds. Having this constellation gives the same benefit as Kuki, where you now have 100% uptime on his skill. It also allows him to trigger Burgeons 2 more times in his skill window, granted that you create Dendro Cores fast enough. For C2, while Burr's burst is active, all party members will gain a buff depending on their current HP. This buff will exist even if they are off-field. If the party member's HP is under 50%, they will receive a 20% incoming healing bonus. If the party member's HP is over 50%, they will receive a 15% elemental damage bonus for their element. This constellation is good for maintaining team survivability if you're taking a lot of damage, but also giving them a damage boost if they're surviving pretty well. C3 simply increases the level of his elemental skill by 3. This constellation boosts his skill level, effectively giving you more personal damage. Objectively, it's his worst constellation. At C4, when Burr triggers a Vaporize, Burning, or Burgeon reaction, he will regenerate 1 energy for the entire team. This effect can be triggered every 1 second, and he can trigger this while off-field. This constellation gives Burr some additional battery potential. He'll be triggering Burgeons roughly 10 times every 15 seconds, which means he'll be providing 10 free energy for his team in that window. C5 will increase the level of his burst by 3, and this constellation essentially provides more healing with his skill and a minor increase to his personal damage. At C6, when Burr triggers a Vaporize, Burning, or Burgeon reaction, his elemental mastery will be increased by 20 for 5 seconds. This effect can stack up to 5 times. This constellation improves his personal Burgeon damage, and if you happen to Vaporize or Burn on accident, that damage will also be increased due to the higher EM stat. Moving on to his artifact builds, Burr's best set will of course be the Flower of Paradise Lost. Being an EM scaler who specializes in Burgeon means that he's capable of making full use of the set and its benefits. Your next best option is Gilded Dreams, since he's both attack and EM scaling. The bonus is very easy to trigger, and regardless of your team, you'll have a very nice bonus. This set is also more efficient to farm, since the domain itself has 2 very useful sets. A couple honorary mentions include Ocean Hued Clam and Tenacity of the Millilith. Burr heals enough to trigger consistent clams, but this healing wouldn't be enough to give the full damage every 3 seconds. As for Tenacity, his skill hits a lot, meaning the 4-piece effect gives a constant attack and shield strength buff. He is not an HP scaler however, so the 2-piece effect isn't that good on him. For artifact stats, go for full EM main stats to maximize his Burgeon damage. You can also do attack healing bonus to boost his healing potential. If you need to burst on cooldown, then you would likely need an energy recharge stance instead. For Burr's best weapons, there are 3 types that would work on him. The first and best ones are EM swords. His best 5-star is Freedom Sworn. Freedom Sworn has a good base attack and a good EM stat. It's very easy to generate stacks for the passive, which would improve your overall team damage. Zypho's Moonlight would give Burr an energy recharge bonus based on his EM, and he'll also give his team a smaller ER bonus. ER is a pretty good stat on him, so this would probably be his best 4-star option. Another 2 options you have include Tokubo Shigure and Iron Sting, which help improve his personal damage, but more importantly, have an EM stat for his Burgeons. The second weapon type would be Energy Recharge Swords. As mentioned earlier, his burst might be necessary if you need constant healing, so giving him an ER sword can help you burst on cooldown and keep your team alive. Sapwood Blade is likely his best free-to-play ER sword. By triggering Burgeon or Burning, you can create the leaf that provides 60 EM to any party member, even himself. Keep in mind that this sword limits him to only work in Dendro-based teams, but I don't see it being a problem since he's focused on triggering a Dendro-based reaction. The third type of sword includes attack percent swords. These are less recommended since you lose out on his reaction damage, but Burr is an attack scaler in both his damage and healing, so it's a viable choice for him if you have nothing else. Now let's move on to a custom weapon I made for him. Since I already have a series where I make 4-star signature weapons, it's only right that I make one for these OCs. Burr's signature is called Endless Embers. It has a base attack of 510, an EM substat of 165, and the passive is called Bouncing Ball. Upon triggering an elemental reaction, the user's attack is increased by 6 to 12%, with a maximum of 5 stacks, 1 stack every 1 second, which lasts for 5 seconds even if off-field. At maximum stacks, they'll gain a 15 to 30% energy recharge, which persists until max stacks disappear. If you've seen my last signature weapon episode, you'll recognize this weapon is almost the exact same as Kuki's. They have very similar kits, with the main difference being their different scalings. I gave Bird's weapon attack bonuses instead of HP, and I changed the healing bonus to energy recharge since he needs ER more. Burr is designed around being an off-field Burgeon DPS, so that's a team I'll be focusing on. Most likely, he'll want to be the only Pyro unit in the team, so as to prevent other Pyro units from stealing his Dendro cores or applying too much Pyro. His best Dendro unit would be Nahida, Alhaitham, or Dendro MC. I know that I said that shielders wouldn't be good teammates, but an exception to that is Baizhu. Baiju's shield is paper thin, which means it's possible for the Burgeon cores to break through, dealing smaller damage to your teammate and still giving Burr a stack of his A4 passive. Additionally, Baiju's own A4 passive gives your team a damage bonus to Dendro cores. You'd occasionally have to swap into Burr to maintain the effect, but a 50k HP Baizhu would increase his Burgeon damage by an additional 100%. Meanwhile, his best Hydra units are going to be Xingqiu, Ayato, Tartaglia, or Yelan. Kokomi is also a great option for her skill's AoE, and if Burr's healing isn't enough, an extra healer would be helpful. Additional units include Animo units like Sucrose, Kazuha, or Venti. Kazuha and Venti have exceptional grouping, while Sucrose works better to provide EM with her passives. For all of them, you should be careful that they don't absorb Pyro and steal Burr's Burgeons. He won't perform too well in other archetypes, but I will give a mention to Burning and Burn Melt teams. Burr applies slower Pyro, but it should be enough to help maintain a burning aura on enemies, which can pave the way for a Burn Melt team. The most common example that I've seen for this is a Ganyu, Nahida, Bennett, Zhongli team. Burr can substitute Bennett to make up for the healer and Pyro slot, and since Burgeon doesn't occur in this team, it doesn't matter if you have a shielder like Zhongli. You can also use Burr in a Vaporize or Melt comp. In my opinion, his personal damage would be too low to justify running this seriously, but anyone can be a good main DPS if you build them right. Just focus damage-oriented stats instead of EM, and it'll work best for this comp. Alright, that about sums up everything I have for this new character. I think next time I do an episode like this, I'll take it a step further and make an entire backstory for them. Let me know in the comment section what you liked about this character's kit, and what you would want me to change. Additionally, let me know if there's any archetype you want me to cover for another character concept. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!